Hello and welcome back to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar. In this video we'll be concentrating on the meanings, messages and methods as put forward in A Broken Appointment, the poem by Thomas Hardy. Now Hardy is a fascinating Victorian poet and novelist, and his lifetime is equally fascinating. He is born in 1840, the last year of the Industrial Revolution's evolution, just before the onslaught that is the Crimean War, and actually the infancy of the Victorian era, and with that the British Empire. Though if we fast forward to the year of his death, 1928, by then Britain has suffered with several other wars, the Boer War, World War I, and in that time women have also got the vote. So really his Victorian childhood, adolescence and adulthood then evolves into modernity. His lifetime, therefore, helps show huge change, and his poetry concentrates on turmoil. He concentrates largely on themes such as disappointment, failure, frustration with love, and the personal implications of societal constraints on love. He writes about broken relationships and desperation across his novels also. Now, linked down below, I have other analyses of other poetic works that concentrate on similar themes to A Broken Appointment. That's Neutral Tones, At an Inn, and even Ruined Maid. They might be of use to you to get additional contextual information that I have for you on Thomas Hardy also. This poem, though, similar to the others I've just referenced by Hardy, dwells on a poetic voice who recounts a traumatic moment. In this case, it's faced by a man who wanted a woman. He's addressing this woman whom he loved because he wished she would love him. It's also important for you as a critic and an analyst with me to consider the conscious use of musicality in the words and the sounds that the language that Hardy uses create for us. We get this deep embedding of the pain with the sounds of the words and the guttural sounds at points. Let's now zoom in on the actual title. A Broken Appointment. The title definitely reflects something quite clinical. The noun appointment seems much more pragmatic, like the word I use to something I have to do, like go to the dentist, rather than a romantic liaison. And I wonder if that's partly emphasised further through the use of the adjective broken, which definitely heightens the sadness, the disappointment, and actually the frustration that this meeting didn't happen. Across this poem, like the title suggests, the poetic voice is concentrating on how that moment, that broken appointment, led to rejection in love. And actually, how unrequited love remains the focus across this poetic voice's vision of the events that happened. As we read it, I want you to try and pick out any language that zooms in for you on the pain of this moment. You did not come, and marching time drew on and wore me numb. Yet less for loss of your dear presence there, than that I thus found lacking in your make, that high compassion which can overbear reluctance for pure loving kindness' sake. Grieved I when, as the hope hour stroked its sum, you did not come. You love not me, and love alone can lend you loyalty. I know and knew it, but unto the store of human deeds divine in all but name, was it not worth a little hour or more to add yet this? Once you, a woman, came to soothe a time-torn man, even though it be you love not me? Each stanza of this poem starts with a strong, cold, negative statement and accusation that seems immovable. You did not come. There's raw emotion there. And then we move on as the poem continues into line 2 with the impatience of waiting in vain and marching time drew on. If you can hear the long vowel sounds, we can really echo with the frustration of our speaker. And it wore me numb. Our speaker is definitely correlating the rejection affecting their self-worth. The alliteration we find in lines 3 and 4 is fascinating because it's as if our speaker is trying to piecemeal together the realisation that they're still devastated from something that happened then, yet less for loss than that I thus, that they're trying to piece it together for themselves. And it sounds a bit fumbling. But if anything, the realisation that our speaker has as they continue to relive the trauma of that past moment, they're still a bit shocked at being jilted in such an inhumane way. They're talking about how high compassion could have been something they would expect, but actually there was a reluctance for pure loving kindness' sake. So there's an interesting question here. Was it the illusion of goodwill to not show up? By their reluctance to not attend, was that good? To our speaker, it's absolutely awful. The elision of loving kindness into one thing accentuates what was missing from the person they're speaking to. Their addressee is getting told, you should have been a kinder person, because that would have helped us out. Because instead, the consequence is shown to us in the final couplet. And the syntax of that final couplet really accentuates for us how much the suffering for the self of our speaker is ongoing. Grieved I. And that's an unusual way for us to choose to speak today. But the emphasis on how he felt seems a bit imperfect, actually. The use of the past tense, to me, seems fake. I think they're still suffering now. They're still grieving now. But more than that, if we continue to look at the syntax of that whole final couplet, what follows, there are 2 commas between one word, when, and it forces us as a reader, when we're reading it, grieved I, when, to take 2 sharp inhalations of breath. And that adds to the trauma of that moment. The traumatising realisation that you're still suffering of something that happened in the past when that damage was done. And that hope hour, well, its sum was done. So we're given the semantic field of time across this poem, but the hope hour is done. And so we're back again to the futile start of our stanza in the final line of that stanza. You did not come. It adds to the sense that we can't move on. We're on repeat. The brokenness of our speaker cannot be changed or moved on from. They're stuck. It makes sense to now dig deeper into the actual mechanics of this poem, its rhyme scheme, because it gives us a deeper understanding of potentially where our poet was seeking to take this interesting scenario. So as you can see, we have the poem starting and ending with a couplet. And the couplets have iambic diameter, which is an unstressed syllable, then a stressed syllable, and 2 metrical feet per line. So let me explain that. You love not me. We get the sense that there's difference between the speaker and who they're addressing through the way we are forced to enunciate the unstressed and stressed in each of the words that we say. It shows that there's conflict and it adds to the sense of impassioned pain. Yet the quatrain sandwiched between these couplets is iambic pentameter. It's got a rigid rhyme scheme, and iambic pentameter is often referred to as the heartbeat of a poem because it mirrors the number of beats that we would find in a healthy heartbeat. So in the sandwich between the pain, if you like, is a heart that beats for something different. Now, if we look quite carefully at the iambic pentameter, I know and knew it, but unto the store. That's just one line that continues to show the passion of the speaker under the constraints of iambic pentameter. It's as if her attitudes forced him into more pain within his heart. Very deep stuff, right? Stanza 2 emotively concentrates on the consequences of that day, of that event, of her not showing up. And his big guilt trip is true love would show up. They'd show loyalty, okay? You love not me. Because if you did, you'd have shown up that day and told me to my face. It's a bit like today being dumped by text or something. It's not okay. We refer to the store of human deeds. Now, that's interesting. Now, that idea that's conjured up, it's suggesting that if you had courage, all right, you'd have met me one more time and told me to my face. And there's a real ongoing sense that our speaker cannot let go of that. And the reference is to time across this poem, but specifically in lines 5 and 7 of stanza 2, where was it not worth a little hour or more to soothe a time-torn man? Flag how deep-rooted this memory is. There's no dislodging it. Because it's as if time is the eternal punishment for not being able to move on from this moment. The reflection of time-torn man reflects the kind of resignation and frustration of our poetic voice. You just can't let it go. Intriguingly, though, this poem ends with a question. Even though it be, you love not me? It's a question, not a statement. And potentially that punctuation helps explain the troubled mind of our speaker even more. The question presents the lack of closure for them. And that lack of closure is why they're still racking their brain about that moment in the past. There's no denying that Hardy is an expert at putting unrequited love under the spotlight. And he does that expertly here. The thing that's so fascinating about this particular poem is that the accusations are coming thick and fast. But we as speakers of our own hearts and minds, as readers with our own interpretations, must be questioning, did she ever love him? What was her side of the story? We never get a chance to really understand it. She is simply guilt-tripped for what she failed to deliver. And we know it's a she, just to be clear. Once you, it says, on line 7 of our stanza 2. A woman. And again, we have the same business as in the first stanza of the sharp inhalations of breath with a clause with 2 commas in between it. There's definitely resentment about the woman. Now, many people call Hardy a woman hater. Please look elsewhere for my other videos to understand more about the nuances of his own love life. But he definitely portrays here a speaker who can't move on, who's obsessed with the rejection and what it's done to him, and has hurt his way through, etching out his pain in some beautifully musical language. Hopefully this poem is now unpacked for you in a way that means you can approach a broken appointment with a fresh gaze. Because it's the sort of poem you can read many times and get very confused by. All the best. Why not subscribe to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar for all things English, literary and grammatical?